Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bowtie Security Guy After Dark. This is episode 30. With me today is Rosa Rowles. I wanted to have Rosa on because she has a super cool job. And a lot of people have asked me about social engineering and things because I've done that in the past. And I just like what you're doing. I'd love to start with just simply, how did you kind of get into technology? What led you into this field?
So it's interesting. I've always been fascinated by psychology and human behavior, which is not necessarily into technology necessarily. And I've been working in hotels. I have been working for nearly 20 years in hotels, which really exposed me to a lot of human behavior, both positive and negative. And I met Chris Hadnagy a few years before the pandemic. And he would talk about his job and what he did as far as breaking into banks and all that cool stuff. And I'm thinking, wow, a job where you get to use principles of influence and study human behavior and then actually put it to practice. So I was fascinated with the idea of social engineering, but I never really thought I had the qualifications to be part of a job, or I guess you could say start a career in that field. So as things progressed or not progressed so much with COVID 2020, a lot of us that worked in the hotel industry got laid off or furloughed.
Mhm.
So during that time, I was looking for a new job. I reached out to Chris for a reference, and he told me that there was an entry-level position in his company and then offered me a job. So I took it just thinking, I don't know how this is going to go. I don't have the expertise, but I was trained by a great team and I learned so much. So that has definitely helped me with my growth.
Well, I think it's interesting. So you mentioned kind of you started your career, and I feel like this is the story of every professional social engineer is like I wasn't trying to find a job in social engineering and it just kind of happened. Um, like for me, my journey was like I was talking poorly about the anti-phishing program, and someone's like, "Oh, you think you could do better?" And I'm like, "I do." And I ended up doing social engineering for Disney for many years, and it's one of those things where I think a lot of people don't realize how important those people skills are early on. Like, what have you been able to use in your like what you've learned, kind of just dealing with irate customers and things of that nature that kind of helps you become a better social engineer, or how did that kind of transition you into that? Was it an easy, you looked at it and you're like, oh, well, I've done things similar to this, and here's how I can apply it, or was it all new?
There are definitely some similarities and overlap in how you deal with people, and the experience from the hotel industry definitely translated into what I do now. Especially, I can definitely think of ego suppression. I was working at the front desk, and you will get these people that will come down irate because their room wasn't ready yet, or they needed a key to their room, which they had lost, and I'm requesting their ID. And they were like, no, I don't have my ID on me. And how dare you ask me for verification to get into my room? So understanding that, okay, this is a person that's going to be late to a meeting. And there's definitely fear behind that anger response, and finding alternatives and ways to help them. Also giving them different options. So they feel that they're not pigeonholed into making a specific decision. That's definitely helpful. And I see that in phishing every day when we're trying to obtain flags from our targets. And first of all, we have to listen to whatever it is that they have to say, even if it's an objection. That in itself gives us a lot of information. So being patient, active listening, and ego suppression definitely go a long way in social engineering.
Yeah, I think it's key too, right? And like even somebody telling you no is more information, right? And when I did a lot of training stuff, I was like, hey, if someone asks you about McAfee or whatever antivirus or other information, don't say we don't have that here. Because even a no is more information. For a social engineer, I think you mentioned the key is like you've really got to understand the person's motivation and why they're acting the way they're acting. But not only that, you also, and I try to explain this to people, it's not an easy job because your job is to exploit human kindness. Like in many cases, especially if you're doing an in-person operation, your job is to befriend that person as quickly as humanly possible, get past their safeguards of stranger danger, and enter into a situation where they feel comfortable with you as an individual. Sometimes that takes a while, other times it's very quick because people in general are nice. So when you finish a social engineering op, how hard is it to go into those rooms and kind of the people that you've deceived to gain access and be like, hey, here's what you need to do next. Here's my actual name versus the name I gave you. And, what is that like for you going into it? I can tell you my side, but I'm curious how you felt going into those.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that because when I first started this job, and I remember doing the calls and having to, like you said, gain trust. I have people telling me that they just had a baby and they just came back from maternity leave and they're telling me all about their new baby, or people that are going to retire and they're telling me their plans for what they want to do with this new chapter in their life. And they are telling me personal details, not only the information that I am trying to elicit for the job, but they're sharing parts of their life with me. And for a time, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this because I just feel that I took advantage of their trust. So,
Yeah.
like, what kind of person does that make me? So, I
Yeah.
really had to take a step back and reframe what I do. So,
Mhm.
I had to tell myself, okay, I am an actor
Yep.
and I am coming up with a pretext with an alias and I'm playing a role to basically play out a scenario for them and to test their security stance. At the end of the day, even if they feel that I guess, misuse of their trust, if that's a way of putting it, it's going to make them more secure.
Right.
So I had to continue to remind myself I am not the bad guy. And
Right.
have a level of empathy is what helps us do this job because
Yeah.
we can use and implement the tools that the bad guys are using, but empathy helps us to maintain ourselves ethical and
Yeah.
never become them. So
Yeah.
when we,
If you didn't feel bad, I think that's the problem. Like if you're like, oh, whatever. For me, I'm right there with you. I felt like I was kind of taking their innocence, and I'm like, what? I'm the monster.
right,
I, I remember someone going, Mark, is any of it real? And I go, about that. My name is actually Rob. Yeah. No, I don't work for the lawn company. No, I'm not a Bears fan. I saw that on your bumper sticker when you came in, and I thought we could build some social trust by doing that. And it's weird because you kind of you're going into this using deception in many cases to exploit their human kindness. And I try to tell people this field is not for everyone. One, it's very difficult mentally because you have to constantly kind of remind yourself, like you said, you're not the bad guy. You're trying to educate them and teach them. And if this was a bad guy, that could have cost them their job. That could have cost them, that could have cost thousands of people's information. So it's like kind of the pros outweigh the cons in many cases, and that's how I was able to justify it and kind of feel okay. And it sounds like you basically did the same thing where you're like, I'd rather it be me than somebody who actually has malicious intent.
right. And as you said, when we do on-site engagements and then we meet with the clients. I had a recent one where it wasn't just the main point of contact. They included a lot of the people that had come face to face where I had used different pretexts. I was working for an internet provider. I was a real estate agent. And the look on their faces, some of them were like, wait a minute, that was you the whole time? And, it's not a good feeling on their end. But then towards the end of the interaction, as we get to explain what we're doing, there's also a sense of relief. And we
Yeah,
also try to include some humor in that. So it's so important to just bring it back to why we're doing this. And
right.
we are helping you be safer, not only as a company, but also as individuals.
Yeah, and it's not about, and a lot of times with security awareness programs in general, there's a very adversarial relationship. And I think that's a very bad way to put it because the goal isn't to trick you or to deceive you. The goal is to educate you so you don't make that mistake when an actual attacker is trying to do things. I've been able to gain access with banks with a clipboard. I've carried a ladder and walked into secure buildings more times than I can count. You as a woman, I'm sure people literally hold the door for you
Yes,
out of
they do.
common courtesy.
They do.
And then you've got to teach them, hey, I get that it is the chivalrous thing to do to hold the door, but you've given me access to your secure facility, and
Right.
that's great, but you've got to change those behaviors because if a bad actor did this, it could be very detrimental. And especially these smaller companies, right? Like a breach is that's it. Like their company goes under.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's really brutal. I've got a few buddies who work with smaller companies when they get compromised, and that compromise can cost them literally everything. So, as much as it can be very disheartening to kind of go in there and tell them like, "Hey, you messed up," it's also very important to know that you're doing it from a place of kindness, and you want to see them be successful, and you want to see them be more secure. So, when you got into social engineering, did you think it was going to be anything like what you do? Did you have a good understanding, or has there been a lot of surprises where you're like, I really didn't think that would be part of this, but it is.
So, you get into social engineering and you're thinking like breaking into buildings and all this cool spy stuff. But in reality, there's a lot more that comes along with it. And reporting was one of those things. No one talks about reporting, or at least I don't hear much about it. So at the end of it all, or at the end of a day, you breaking into buildings, using pretext, doing all kinds
Sure.
of stuff and high intensity. Now you have to go back to your hotel room and document everything. So
Yes.
you're tired, the adrenaline is wearing off, and now you have to sit there and recount all of these details, and that is really crucial because that is how we let our clients know where the vulnerabilities lie
Yeah.
and what they can do to fix them. So, reporting was a part that I was definitely not thinking of when I came into the field, but I actually see the necessity of it. And to see the final report is almost like to see the finished product. Okay,
Yeah.
this is what we did. These are the vulnerabilities, and these are the steps you can take to remediate those.
I think that's critical is a lot of pen testing, whether it be social engineering, pen testing using Kali Linux or Burp or whatever tools you're using, 90% of your job is writing stuff. It is incredibly document heavy. If you're not a fan of documentation, pen testing's not going to be a career for you because a lot of it is so critical to telling the narrative, to explaining the story, to showing the evidence to the timeline, right? I came in at this time in the morning and I was able to gain access because a lot of people were coming in, nobody was really paying attention, or I came in the afternoon, things were a lot harder to do, and it was, I had to do a different way to gain access to the building, etc. So there's a lot of key points that have to be called out. So not only as you're on an engagement, are you actively playing a role, you're actively changing and adapting to scenarios on the fly. That includes people saying, "Why are you here?" or other questions that may arise, or just general conversation that you may have to have with a stranger. You're also looking at the surroundings, taking in as much data as possible that you can use to build social trust. If somebody's got a Star Wars calendar, guess what I'm talking about? Those
Right.
little basic small things are very, very important to telling your narrative and controlling that. But not only that, you have to then remember everything that you're doing and then be able to regurgitate it later. Like, hey, this is some of the things that you told me before I even got in. Here's some of the data I found via OSINT before I even access your company. You're sharing information, you're sharing building, screenshots, you're showing the security in these photos. All of those things are very important. When I first got laid off, people were like, "Hey, I can't find you on LinkedIn." And I was like, "I'm a professional hacker and social engineer. Why would I give anyone access to all of my data?" But I mean, how powerful is a tool like LinkedIn for building social trust?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the first things that we look at when we do OSINT. So, and you're right,
100%.
when, like I'm trying to network and putting your information out there is just so counterintuitive. I'm like, wait a minute, this is what I do when I'm, OSINTing people. Why would I put my information out there?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, in the States, if people want to find information about you, they will. But
Oh,
to
so easy.
purposely put yourself out there, it takes another extra step. It's
Yeah.
part of the industry, I guess.
Well, it is, and it's become so easy, I think, to get information, especially in the United States, which is a great call out because we don't have the right to be forgotten. We don't have the right to privacy in many cases.
Right.
Encryption is not a guarantee on everything, right? There's a lot of your data that is public.
Hmm.
And it is incredibly easy to find out what car you drive, what house you live in. Those are all ways that I can get information from you, in all ways that I can build social trust or create an email. Maybe your vehicle has a recall. You get an email specifically for your vehicle, make, model, and year. I've already built social trust because I know that information. That's why a lot of those, like, I've compromised your computer and here's your address and here is this information, can be very scary to people, um, because they really think that that privacy exists, but it just doesn't. And for a professional social engineer, it's interesting. And I think you probably experience this. A lot of people hire you and your company to fill in gaps because a traditional red team does not normally have a full-time social engineer. It's actually quite rare.
Right.
Is that something you've seen pretty regularly where social engineering is kind of maybe part of a simulation program? Maybe they'll send out a few like phishing simulations, but any sort of real like going into a building or gaining access is relatively rare with most companies.
Yeah, that's definitely a fact. And especially with smaller companies, employees tend to know each other very well. So it'd be very difficult for them to test their own companies, doing red teaming in that sense. But also, even with vishing, again, smaller companies, they know employees very well. So to impersonate an employee, say, I'm the IT manager or head of HR, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I just spoke to you yesterday. You sound nothing like her. So they need to outsource that to provide a realistic scenario for their employees.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense because it's like you said, a smaller company, they're going to know everybody. There were definitely times, even at Disney, which wasn't a smaller company, where someone's like, hang on. I've seen you in a present. You've done a presentation at Disney before. It's like, oh, darn. And your cover's blown and somebody else has to go in. But I think social engineering continues to be the most kind of the number one breach vector, because human kindness, there's not a patch for that. Like
Right,
people want to help people. They don't want to be rude. We're actually taught in our careers to constantly give customer service, to constantly help. So it's a delicate balance in educating someone and then making them so jaded they don't trust anyone and then you can't do
right.
business, right?
Yeah. And also empowering your employees to stop the conversation and verifying the caller. Even when they claim to be a manager or even a vendor, there is a degree of authority. And again, as you
Yeah.
said, we are taught since a very young age to be respectful and to comply
Hmm.
to those in authority. So empowering employees to say, wait a minute, I need to verify you first. And if they can't verify who they're speaking to empower them to end the conversation, even
Yeah.
when it seems to be from someone in their management. Because, of course, now with AI and other technologies, you can do voice cloning.
Oh,
And I mean,
ridiculously
you,
easy. And
how
video
could they
cloning is
tell,
getting
you
simpler.
know, that
Yeah.
they're not speaking to their managers? So, it's very important for there to be a culture within companies that employees feel safe to be able to implement their security protocols.
Yeah, well, and I've recommended too, like going back to some of the old school methods. Like if you have a senior leader, there should be safe words that are cycled, right?
Correct.
And something that is more than just a two-factor, but a word that only they would know that can be validated. Because a lot of that is going to become very easy, and it already is. I put out enough content that somebody could easily build a video model of me and a voice model that would trick my wife. But my subtle nuances, the way I speak and things of that nature, still can't be easily replicated. So it really comes down to teaching and educating and then adding that additional layer of security. Like I always say, security is about adding speed bumps for attackers because
Right.
you're not always going to stop them. You just want to slow them down enough where you can catch them, right? Because if they're able to hit you from multiple angles with no speed bumps and nothing slowing them down, no defense in depth, that's where you're going to run into an issue. And social engineering is one of those areas that can be very vulnerable. Um, and it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of people who are like, "Hey, I want to be a social engineer," and I'm like, "Do you really?" Like, your job is literally to lie and deceive people and then tell them why they're stupid. Now, I'm not saying that they're stupid, right? But the reality is you're exploiting them at a human level, and that can be very distressing to someone because they trusted you, they believed you when you said that you were having a bad day or when you said you were having a struggle, and manipulating that human kindness is always one of those things where you got to have the right mindset for it, like you said. What advice would you give to people who are looking to chase this type of career, knowing that it's so rare? I would argue that less than maybe 5-10% of Fortune 500s actually do engagements like this. It's incredibly rare. What opportunities or how do you think they could get their name in hats, for opportunities? What advice would you give them?
Some research, some thorough research into what social engineering actually entails. And by
Yeah.
listening to podcasts like yours and
Hmm.
talking to other people in the industry, they can get a full scope of what it actually entails. And as you said, it is emotionally taxing at times because,
For sure.
to a degree, we do have to explode that human trust. So if that's something that they feel they can overcome, whether it's through reframing
Hmm.
or the validation of knowing that they're actually improving corporations and individuals to be safer, then from there they could take the next step. And I would say networking is very important. So whether it's on LinkedIn, or going to in-person events, going to conferences.
Yeah.
And I know as an introvert, and oddly enough, most of us that get into this industry, from my experience, are introverts. How do we do
All,
it? I don't know.
all,
Like,
all of us are. I've never met anyone who's a social engineer who's not an introvert, and
right.
which is the irony of that.
It's very ironic. And I think in a way it helps us that we're playing a role when
Yeah.
we're impersonating. So that enables us to do things that it's totally out of our realm of our natural personalities. Um, but getting back to how you pursue this career, when you go to conferences or any in-person events to do with the field, it's important to actually speak to other people there. And I know as an introvert, it's not easy
Right.
to go up to someone and say, hey, like, what do you do? Why are you here? But you really have to put that step forward in order to not know individuals necessarily, but for individuals to know you and
Yeah.
to build those relationships. And that's what's going to help you get your foot in the door.
And I think that's really important. And I'll tell you my theory of why introverts make the best social engineers. And it's because we have spent our whole life masking. We have spent our whole lives pretending to be something we're not. In a crowd, we act very social. We are very chameleons because we know how to act. I always say like because my autism, I've had to basically spend my entire life pretending to be normal to make other people feel comfortable around me. So when it came to being a role or pretending with social engineering or acting as a character, I found it very natural because I had spent my whole life lying about who I truly was. And I think a lot of us as introverts really kind of resonate with that because we have to perform, so to speak, in our jobs or other areas to get a paycheck. And I talk to people all the time. They're like, "Oh, I'm always exhausted after like a whole day at work." It's like, "Well, what do you do?" "I deal with people all day." "Do you like people?" "Oh God, no." It's like, and I'm like, "Well, there you go. Like you've been taxing your adrenal gland all day, and that's why you're tired because your fight
Right.
or flight's going on." One of the more important things I tell new people is you have to embrace the uncomfortable. Like part of doing anything within cyber or technology is being uncomfortable and being okay being like not the smartest person in the room, asking questions when you don't know something. And what I've found is that when you are that person who asks a lot of questions, many times people will come to you and say, "Thank you," because I had no idea what they were talking about, but I just didn't have the courage to say something. In your career, have you seen a lot of that, especially as a female in technology? It's one of those things. Female social engineers, I don't want to say are rare, but they are rarer than males.
Right.
Um, what does that dynamic look like? Do you feel like there's more of a fight for females, or is it getting better?
I do think it's getting better,
Me too.
just for the fact that we use that bias quite well when it comes to social engineering.
Yeah.
It's
Please
always,
underestimate me, right?
yeah, exactly. Like, oh, I don't know anything. I need help. I'm clueless. Please help me. As sad as it is, we do, as social engineers, play into whatever biases.
Yeah.
And that is very effective. So for that reason, I do feel that um, we are becoming more prevalent in the field
Mhm.
and leaning into that for our success in our careers is truly pivotal. Instead of taking it as a negative, we can flip it around and use it as a tool. So I definitely
Yeah.
think that's so effective.
Well, one of the things too that I know a lot of social engineers do is, and someone's like, "Oh, well, they're a pretty woman. They're just gonna, exploit the guy pr being pretty." And I was like, "No, that's actually something that's most social engineers are very
What's
against,
unethical? Yeah.
completely unethical." Um, but it's interesting because a lot of people just assume that. And I always try to explain like there's no value in befriending someone and then like pretending to care about them in any sort of relationship way to gain
No.
access because that is horrific, right? That is the difference between the people who are monsters who are doing social engineering and the ones that are the ones just trying to help people. So in your field, and like you said, it's unethical, right?
Right.
What are some other areas that you think maybe new people could kind of, psychology, I think, is a big part, but is there other areas that they could study that you think would be beneficial to a career in social engineering?
Let's see. Other than psychology, it's interesting how acting also plays a
Yeah.
role in this a lot. So I actually had a colleague that took improv classes
Yes. I was going to
that,
recommend that.
yeah, helped him to like get into the different roles and play different scenarios. So if you can get into any type of acting class, and that's definitely going to help with the different aliases that we play.
Yeah. Improv, I think, is great in multiple ways. One, you will feel stupid and you'll get used to feeling stupid, right? When you're pretending to act out a scene in front of a crowd, those things become very empowering, even from a public speaking perspective. I've
Right.
taken improv classes and I do D&D every Monday where I play a character and I do silly voices and things of that nature. Um, I think all of that really ties into this career super well because it's critical to be able to not only be the character, but really believe that you're the character.
Yes.
Because that
Mhm.
believability that you have in yourself will resonate to the customer. And you had given me some we chatted at the local ISC Squared event, and you had said that you had social engineered yourself when you did a presentation because it was much easier to be somebody else. And I thought that was beautiful because that's so true. It's easier for us to be a character than it is to be our introverted self, where we're like, oh, I don't, you're gonna judge me.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, but if you're judging the character, I'm okay with that.
Right. Yeah, that's not me. So, yeah, I found it interesting how we use social engineering to influence other people
Yeah,
to take an action that they normally would not. So, why can't we use those same principles and techniques on us
yeah,
to do things that it's out of the norm for us? So, I thought maybe I can implement some of these for myself and use that in public speaking and just create a whole persona based on those principles. And it actually worked quite well to my surprise. Mm.
yeah. Well, and I think that's the key is when you can disassociate yourself from the person presenting, you can feel a lot more comfortable in the ire that you may get because of the things you say, or maybe you don't say something perfect. You're like, well, that's them that they're mad at, not me.
Right.
You know? And like I told you, even a bad presenter is more memorable than a good presenter, because you'll remember the things that somebody said if they mess up more than you will that person that was just a good presenter. You either need to be
True.
excellent or bad. And those are the two memorable qualities of a presenter. No, that's awesome. I love kind of your journey, spending the time that you did, I think with front desk, dealing with all those customers. I think anyone with a customer facing role, who has to deal with the clients and people in person all the time would do okay at social engineering. I think the mental perseverance side of it is really what you have to ask yourself. Like
Right.
mentally, can you handle a job where deception is what you do? You're doing it for the greater good, but at the same time, it's very hard. I know there were many times, just like you had mentioned, like you have to kind of like look yourself in the mirror and be like, oh man, that one really sucked. Like I really love Tina, or I really love this
Yeah.
person because they were so sweet and so
Oh,
kind.
that's the
And
worst. Yeah, I'd rather get
I,
someone that, I've been
you're
told you're
yelling
a
at me.
scammer. Like, okay, great.
Yeah.
I love it. Hang up on me. But when you get that sweet person that just
Super
opens things up,
kind.
they're so nice.
Yeah.
Like, no, no, now I need to take a break from these calls and like get myself together. But as you said, I also do implement that role playing with myself so that if I call pretending to be, let's say, whomever from IT, helping them, like, okay, I really am that person. I'm helping them right now.
Yeah, I
And
believe it.
that does help me get through the call, not
Yep.
feeling bad, and helps me get through the pretext and elicit all the flags. But after the call, when reality sets in, it's like, oh man, I feel so bad. So
Yeah.
there are
They were they
times
were
you
they were
need a
so
break.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you feel so bad. And this goes back to a lot of jobs in technology where keeping your mental game fresh, forgiving yourself for the hard
Mhm.
days, and also just kind of taking a step back and being okay taking a break. That is absolutely critical in all of security. Well, Rosa, I have absolutely enjoyed you coming on. I think
For having me.
of course I think the information that you shared is going to be invaluable to a lot of people. I've had a lot of people ask me about my social engineering career. Hearing it firsthand from somebody who literally does this job every day, I think will give a lot of people some insights that they didn't have. And that's what this podcast is all about, kind of helping educate that next generation to say like, yeah, this might be something you want, but are you really know what you're signing up for? And I think after this chat, they'll be like, yeah, maybe not. Maybe that's not for me. Or maybe they'll be like, that sounds amazing. Because it
Right.
is super cool. The
It is.
adrenaline rush that you get from gaining
It
access
is.
to a building, the adrenaline rush you get from getting flags, is
You almost
very
get
addictive.
addicted to it. So,
You it
yeah,
not almost. It is
you
very
do.
I'm excited talking about it because it's reminding me of times that I
Right.
did it, right? It is very addictive, and that's another thing too that you've got to really
Right.
monitor yourself and say like, have I gone too far, or should I be pulling back because I'm just really into this op? Because I've had that situation before where I'm like, okay, I've been going for like 12 hours. I can stop now. Like I need to take a break.
Yes. Yeah, it's self-awareness is always needed for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming. Anyone else listening? Good luck out there.